I'd like to present our second keynote speaker, Gillian Sorensen, former United Nations Assistant Secretary General for External Relations. Gillian Sorensen has had a long career working with and for the United Nations, most prominently as Assistant Secretary General for External Relations on appointment by both Kofi Annan and Boutros Boutros-Ghali. An experienced public speaker and compelling advocate, she has addressed audiences as diverse as Rotary International, West Point Military Academy, and the United States Air Force Academy, university students, journalists, and leaders of civil society. In recent years, she has made nearly 1,000 appearances, speaking about the United Nations and all related issues. She is currently serving as an active member of the board of the International Rescue Committee and as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. We are very, very grateful that Mrs. Sorensen is able to speak today. Gillian Sorensen.
Greetings and good morning to all of you who come together to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, a very special day. A particular thanks to Mary Steiner, the president of the United Nations Association, who has done such a wonderful job organizing, and my respects and admiration to your two senators, Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein, to Governor Gavin Newsom, and to your member of Congress, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and of course to your Mayor London Breed. What distinguished leadership you have. And also a special hello to Charlotte Maillard Schultz, with whom I worked on the 50th anniversary back in 1995. It is fitting that we gather in San Francisco, where the charter was drafted in 1945. It was, as you know well, born out of the ashes of war. 100 million people died in the two world wars. And as early as 1942, Franklin Roosevelt was thinking, how could we learn lessons from the past? How could the United States do better and do more this time? And he was determined to organize a new international organization. This time, the United States would be a leader, would be a supporter and an inspiration and a host. It would be a new effort for peace and justice that would last. He had done early preparatory work, but Roosevelt died unexpectedly in April, and your conference was scheduled for May and June. The participants in the conference were already on their way by ship and by train. They could not turn back. The new president, Harry Truman, couldn't make the trip to San Francisco, and he designated his Secretary of State, Edward Stettinius, to be the head of the American delegation. And as San Franciscans know, there were 50 countries represented, each with large delegations. There were about 100 observers, now we call them non-governmental organizations, and there might have been 1,000 reporters. It was a major world event, and everyone traveled a great distance to be there. Over those 2 months, with very complex and lengthy negotiations, they created the architecture of the United Nations that exists today. The General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, the Secretariat, which was the headquarters, and the International Court of Justice were the start. It was then, as now, an expression of hope, a vision for a better world. It reflected idealism without illusion, and it acknowledged the reality that global crises require global responses. I live with a deep and abiding conviction that the UN matters and that we need to say so loud and clear, that it is a unique and valuable instrument, imperfect, but indispensable, that it serves our national interest as well as the global interest, and that when the United States is fully committed, visible, and engaged, the chance of success is always greater. And that true success requires broad public support, where the United Nations Association has played such an important role. This work has been going now for 75 years. It has had its ups and downs. It's an imperfect organization, but it has done extraordinary things in peace and development and democratization, in disarmament, in human rights and humanitarian and refugee relief, in health and response to pandemics, in reproductive health and safe birth, in water and sanitation, in food and nutrition, in security and nuclear arms reduction. The United Nations has played a critical role. In the many years where I worked there, under several secretaries general and came to know hundreds of ambassadors, it seemed to me that the UN was a venue where everyone could come together, large and small, powerful and not so powerful, and be heard. They could make coalitions, they could build alliances, they could put stress on the issues that were of most importance to them, but everyone felt connected across borders. As we approach an anniversary, we can be honest and say the UN has had its shortcomings. It is not as efficient as it should be. It's become a large bureaucracy. There have been some abuses of power by peacekeepers, and now those are in check. But on the whole, I think it has been an extraordinary and unique institution. There is no other like it. But for it to succeed, countries, including our own, need to recognize and honor the value of diplomacy, the power of words, to persuade, to inspire, to unify all of us. And the US, as well as other countries, need to respect the importance of diplomats who have real expertise, knowledge of history and foreign affairs, multilingual skills, and can bring all of that to the multitude of issues that come up in the United Nations. Of course, over time, there have been ups and downs, but I have never doubted until now that all the presidents in my lifetime have had, by and large, understanding and respect of the important role of the UN. These days, I am deeply concerned that the value of diplomacy seems to have been dismissed, and the value of the military has been enhanced. Now, we do know the limits of military might, and I would say that we should all remember that diplomacy and defense are two sides of a coin. And it is interesting to me to recall that in the last year, some 100 four-star generals and the equivalent through all the branches of the military service sent a letter urging the federal government to give more contributions, more support to the State Department and organizations like the UN. They understand that if diplomacy is succeeding, their need to send soldiers will diminish. There are, of course, in these many years, shifts of power and wealth. Small countries have emerged. Big countries like China have been transformed. Countries such as, for example, Singapore and Netherlands, very small countries, exert power well beyond their size. But we have a different configuration now of 193 member states. Some critics like to say, oh, the UN is trying to run the world. That's not so. The United Nations is a reflection of the political power and the will of the member states. And those states join voluntarily. They do it because they know it is a place to connect and to influence and to persuade. Well, if we look ahead, we can't be sure what will come in the next 75 years. But I hope that we will have a celebration then that will look back at 2020 and say between then and another 75 years, good things have happened. I go from time to time into the UN headquarters. It's an iconic building, as most of you know. And I am reminded that generation after generation of young, committed, idealistic, smart, eager diplomats and supporters of the UN are working there now. New leadership is in place and good people from all parts of the world. It always warms my ear to hear multiple languages when I step in the elevator and remember the many days that I walked across town, west side to east side, and over to the UN to do my day's work. So thanks to all of you. To the United Nations Association, you are remarkable, and you are everywhere across this country and around the world through the World Federation of UNAs. We need your support. We need support from others, from the religious community, the business community, the academic world, and others, because without a wide public understanding of the UN, it is weakened. So once again, I wish you a happy celebration, a good anniversary, a thoughtful look back, and an optimistic look forward. Thank you again for allowing me to join you this morning.